You know those spooky stories your parents told you to keep you from wandering out at night? Well, what if they were real? Because in the 18th century, in the heart of Europe, people were terrified of men who rode flying goats, a gift from the devil himself, after they renounced God. They were called the Bug Riders, but this isn't just some campfire story. Today we're digging into the man who hunted them, Johannes Clerks, to uncover a story of terror, justice and a chilling question. Was he the hero, or did he become the very monster he was hunting? In the borderlands of the 18th century, a fractured region that's now part of Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany, a terror gripped the night. This was a time of deep poverty and social unrest, where the gap between the suffering poor and the fortified elite was a chasm of pure resentment. Out of this desperation, whispers started to twist into a full-blown legend, the legend of the Bug Riders. According to the folklore that spread like wildfire, these weren't just your average thieves. They were a godless brotherhood who had literally signed a pact with Satan. In their initiation, they swore a blasphemous oath. I renounce God and swear submission to the devil. In exchange for their souls, the devil gave them a supernatural power, the ability to fly through the moonless sky on the backs of demonic goats. This let them cover huge distances in a single night, hitting isolated farms, rich estates and even churches with terrifying speed. Picture it, you're a farmer, huddled with your family as the fire dies down. Suddenly you hear a sound from outside, not horses, but something unnatural. You peek out to see the dark figures descending from the sky, their goat mounts silhouetted against the stars. The story said their arrival was often preceded by a threatening letter demanding money, or else your home and barns would be burned to the ground. This legend became an incredible tool. The fear it created was almost as powerful as the crimes themselves. The name Bug Riders was first used in a trial around 1774, when a man threatening a farmer claimed he was part of the satanic rule. The myth and reality were blurring, creating a perfect storm of panic. The church, for its part, fanned the flames, painting the Bug Riders as a diabolic cult. And just like that, a crime wave turned into a witch hunt. The legend became so powerful that some arrested men would confess to impossible things. One man, Matthijs Smits, claimed he flew from Venlo to Weert with 42 other men on a single giant goat. Whether he truly believed it or was just saying what his torturer wanted to hear, we never know. The legend had taken on a life of its own, a terrifying story that haunted every shadow in the lands of Limburg. So that's the legend, but the truth behind the flying goat is a lot more human, a lot grittier. The 18th century was a brutal time in this region. War and injustice had plunged people into poverty. This was the fertile ground where organized gangs of bandits began to sprout. They weren't a single unified satanic army, but more likely scattered groups of desperate, violent criminals. In their own time, they were just called the Night Thieves, and their crimes were brutally real. Extortion, violent robberies and raiding churches. To put a face to the hunted, we just have to look at men like Johannes Arnold van der Wal, better known as Nonneke van Galeen, born in 1749. Nonneke was a tailor, a musician, a charismatic guy who used his connections to become a captain of a Bug Rider gang. Under his leadership, his crew pulled off numerous break-ins and sent out those terrifying letters holding the countryside hostage. He wasn't a demon on a goat, he was a product of his time, a man who turned to organized crime in an era of chaos. His story shows us the reality of the Bug Riders, not mythical monsters, but desperate men. And every monster, real or imagined, needs a hunter. Enter Johannes Matthias Clerks, born in 1759. Clerks was a man of the law, from a well-off family. He became the secretary of their local court, and was immediately faced with the escalating violence of the bandit gangs. Clerks was determined and absolutely relentless. He was a drossard, a kind of high-ranking official, basically a regional police chief, responsible for keeping order. As the chaos spread, he was given the authority to lead the hunt. Clerks wasn't just some guy behind a desk, he was an active investigator. When a threatening letter surfaced in 1787, he personally organized a stakeout. His first efforts failed, and the crimes continued, but every failure just seemed to harden his resolve. He quickly earned a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. He was the force of order, pushing back against the gales. He was the hunter, and the buck riders were his prey. The stage was set for a brutal showdown, not between good and evil, but between two opposing forces in a lawless land. When the crackdown came, it was merciless. Led by drossards like Johannes Clerks, the authorities launched a series of mass arrests and trials that went on for decades. From the 1740s to the 1790s, hundreds of suspects were rounded up, sometimes based on nothing more than a rumor. This period is now seen as one of the most brutal witch hunts in the region's history. And this is where Johannes Clerk's story takes a dark turn, and the line between hero and villain just dissolves. So how did he get his convictions? Well, the main tool in his toolbox was torture. Confessions weren't given, they were brutally extracted. Suspects were put through horrific torments until they not only confessed to being buck riders, but also named accomplices. This created a devastating domino effect. One tortured confession led to dozens more arrests, and the cycle repeated. It's now believed that many of the hundreds who were executed were innocent, victims of a justice system that demanded a confession at any cost. The confessions themselves were a twisted mix of fact and fantasy. Under duress, people admitted to robbery and extortion, but they also confessed to the folklore, the unholy oath, the pact with the devil, the impossible flights on goatback. These fantastical elements were likely born from the extreme suffering of the accused, who maybe latched onto the myths to make sense of their ordeal, or simply told the judges what they thought they wanted to hear. Clerks himself oversaw the conviction and execution of dozens. In just one campaign he had 46 people sentenced to death. Was he a righteous lawman, or a zealot running a system that cared more about confessions than truth? The punishments were barbaric. Over 90% of those convicted were sentenced to death. They were hanged, strangled, beheaded, or even burned alive. Their bodies often left on display as a gruesome warning. And this is the chilling central question of the Buck Rider saga. Who was the real demon? Was it Nolke van Galeen, the desperate criminal robbing the rich in a time of crushing poverty? Or was it Drossard Clerks, the man of the law who used unimaginable cruelty to force confessions, blurring the line between justice and atrocity? The trials weren't just about stopping crime, they became a brutal spectacle of power, where superstition and fear led to horrific injustice that would stain the region for centuries. The story of the Buck Riders is a dark but fascinating chapter of European history, and there are countless more tales from the shadows waiting to be told. If you want to keep exploring that intersection of history, folklore, and the darker side of human nature, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. So what happened to our hunter and his prey? The brutal campaigns led by Johannes Clerks and others worked. In a way, the bandit gangs were broken. Johannes Arnold van der Wal, or Nolke van Galeen, was captured in July 1789 and hanged just 2 months later. His wife, Barbara Beggen, was accused and met the same fate the next year. The hunter, Johannes Clerks, lived a long life, dying in 1814, but his legacy is anything but simple. He restored order, but at a terrible price. His methods were so notoriously brutal that folklore twisted his story too. Rumors spread that Clerks himself was a bloodthirsty werewolf, or that his restless ghost now haunts the land he once patrolled as a giant black dog. The Buck Riders were defeated, but the legend was just getting started. The historical truth, a story of poverty, crime and horrific violence, was slowly buried under the more romantic, terrifying myth. The image of bandits on flying ghosts was just a better story than the complex reality that created them. In the 19th century, writers and storytellers embraced the legend, cementing the Buck Riders as a permanent part of the region's cultural heritage. Today you can find monuments dedicated to them, and their tale has been adapted into books, TV shows, and even a famous theme park ride. But what is the true legacy here? It's a powerful reminder of how easily fear and superstition can be twisted and used by those in power. It shows how the line between the lawman and the criminal can become terrifying thin. The Buck Riders were almost certainly not a unified satanic cult. They were scattered gangs of thieves, driven by desperation, who were crushed by a legal system that used the public's fear of the devil to justify its own brutality. The tale of the Buck Rider hunter and his demonic prey is not a simple story of good versus evil. It's a murky, disturbing look at how a society, gripped by panic, can create its own monster, both in its criminals it fears and in the men it empowers to stop them. It leaves us with one final, unsettling question. In the end, who do you think was the real demon? The thieves who rode in the night, or the judge who sent hundreds to their death in the name of God and order? Oh, this was my story about the Buck Rider hunter, Johannes Klerks. What do you think about it? Was he good or evil? Let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time with a spooky story. Bye bye.